Hi and welcome to the Archive of History. It is just before dawn in the greatest city the world has ever known. The air is cool and still, carrying the faint scent of burning incense from distant temples and the earthy smell of dew settling on ancient stone. You are standing at the edge of a vast empire in a moment when civilization itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for the sun to rise over the eastern walls of Chang'an. The streets are empty now, silent except for the distant call of a rooster and the soft padding of a night watchman's feet on cobblestone. This is China in the year 100 BCE, and you are about to experience 4 centuries of unprecedented peace, prosperity, and innovation. This is the story of the Han Dynasty, the golden age that would define Chinese civilization for 2,000 years to come. Before we drift off, I am always curious to know where my listeners are tuning in from and what time it is that they are listening tonight. Let me know in the comments. Tonight you will walk through the grandest capital on earth. You will witness the opening of the Silk Road and feel the weight of silk between your fingers. You will stand in the presence of emperors and eat the simple rice of a farmer. You will see an empire rise from the ashes of tyranny, reach heights of glory that would echo through the ages, and eventually crumble under the weight of its own success. This is not a story of battles alone, though there will be conquest. This is not merely a tale of kings, though emperors will rise and fall. This is the story of a civilization at its peak, of a people who called themselves the Sons of Han, and of a golden age that still shapes the world today. The Han Dynasty lasted for over 400 years, longer than the Roman Empire in the West. It was a time when China was the most advanced, most populous, and most powerful nation on earth. During these centuries, paper was invented, changing human knowledge forever. The Silk Road opened, connecting East and West for the first time. Confucian philosophy became the foundation of government, creating a bureaucracy that would last for millennia. Cities grew to populations of hundreds of thousands. Art flourished, science advanced, and common people, for perhaps the first time in history, could rise through merit rather than birth alone. But before the glory there was chaos. Before the Golden Age, there was suffering. And before the Han could rise, the cruelty of the Qin Dynasty had to fall. To understand the light, you must first glimpse the darkness that came before. Now, settle in. Let the noise of the modern world fade away. Let the glow of screens dim to nothing. Close your eyes and let us travel back more than 2,000 years, to a time of jade and silk, of emperors and scholars, of incense smoke, and the quiet turning of pages in lamplight. Let us journey to the Han Dynasty, the golden age of China. The year is 210 BCE, and the first emperor of a unified China lies dead. Qin Shi Huang, the man who conquered the warring states and forced them into a single empire, the man who built the first Great Wall and burned books and buried scholars alive, has died during a tour of his eastern provinces. His death is kept secret by his chief advisor, the eunuch Zhao Gao, who fears chaos. For months the emperor's corpse travels in a sealed carriage, a cart of rotting fish placed alongside to mask the smell of decay. This is how tyranny ends, not with glory, but with the stench of death hidden behind silk curtains. When the news finally breaks, the empire that Qin Shi Huang built with iron and blood begins to fracture. The legalist system he imposed, brutal in its efficiency and merciless in its punishments, has made enemies of nearly everyone. Peasants labor under crushing taxes. Nobles resent the loss of their ancient privileges. Scholars mourn their burned libraries. The heir, a weak and manipulated prince, ascends to a throne that is already crumbling beneath him. Within months, rebellion erupts across the land. Generals defect. Armies mutiny. The empire of 10,000 li dissolves into chaos once more. Among the rebels who rise up against the dying Qin dynasty is a man named Liu Bang. He is not a noble. He is not a scholar. He is not even a particularly distinguished soldier. Liu Bang is a village headman, a minor official in charge of a small group of conscript laborers. His origins are humble, almost laughably so, for a man who will become emperor. He is known for his love of drink, his rough manners, and his ability to inspire loyalty in common men. History will record that his face was plain, his education minimal, and his ambitions, at first, modest. He simply wants to survive. But survival in the collapsing Qin Empire requires more than caution. It requires action. When Liu Bang fails to deliver his group of laborers to a distant worksite on time, he knows the penalty under Qin law is death. Rather than submit to execution, he makes a choice that will change history. He releases his men and flees into the mountains, becoming an outlaw. Some of the laborers follow him, pledging their loyalty to this man who freed them rather than let them die. This small band of fugitives becomes the seed of an army. The wars that follow are brutal and complex, a tangled web of shifting alliances and betrayals that consume China for nearly 2 decades. Liu Bang is not the only rebel leader. There is Yong Yu, a noble-born general of tremendous military skill and legendary cruelty. Yong Yu wins the greatest battles, commands the largest armies, and declares himself the hegemon king of Western Chu. He burns the Qin palaces and kills the last heir of the Qin Dynasty. By all rights, Yong Yu should become the next emperor. But war is not only about strength, it is also about wisdom, patience, and knowing when to show mercy. Liu Bang understands something that Shang Yu does not. He understands that to rule, you must first win the hearts of the people. While Shang Yu executes captured generals and massacres surrendered cities, Liu Bang offers amnesty to those who submit. While Shang Yu demands tribute from the territories he conquers, Liu Bang reduces taxes and treats the common people with respect. Slowly, the balance of power shifts. Former enemies defect to Liu Bang's side. Skilled advisors, seeing his pragmatism, offer their service. The peasant-turned-rebel begins to look like a king. The final confrontation comes in 202 BCE at the Battle of Gaixia. Shang Yu's army is surrounded, outnumbered, and demoralized. In one of history's most poignant moments, Shang Yu hears the songs of his homeland being sung by Liu Bang's troops in the night, a psychological warfare tactic that tells him even his own people have abandoned him. Has he taken all of Chu? Shang Yu asks in despair. Why are there so many men of Chu in his army? That night, in his tent, he composes a final poem for his beloved concubine, Lady Yu, a lament about heroic failure and the cruelty of fate. When dawn comes, he breaks through the siege lines with a few hundred loyal men and rides east. Cornered at a river crossing, with only 28 men left, Shang Yu refuses to flee across the river to safety. Heaven has destroyed me, he declares. It is not a crime of war. He dismounts, draws his sword, and fights until he is overwhelmed. Then he takes his own life. Liu Bang, the peasant who became a rebel who became a general, stands alone as the master of China. He does not claim the title of emperor immediately. He understands that the wounds of the Qin dynasty's cruelty are still fresh. He knows the people are weary of grand titles and brutal centralization, so he accepts a lesser title at first, King of Han, taking the name from the region where he once served as a minor official. But within a year, pressed by his followers and by the logic of the times, he accepts the inevitable. In 202 BCE, Liu Bang becomes Emperor Gaozu of Han, the founder of a new dynasty. He chooses the color red for his banners. He performs the ritual sacrifices to heaven and earth, and he makes a promise, one that will define his reign and the dynasty that follows. He will rule with virtue, not terror. He will restore what the Qin destroyed. He will give China peace. The early years of the Han Dynasty are not easy. The empire Liu Bang inherits is exhausted, depopulated, and poor. Fields lie fallow. Cities are in ruins. The roads that the Qin built for their armies are overgrown. The treasury is nearly empty. There are still warlords in the borderlands who refuse to submit. The nomadic Heshanu tribes to the north, sensing weakness, raid across the frontier with impunity. Liu Bang himself leads an army against the Qinnu in 200 BCE and is ambushed, barely escaping with his life. He is forced to negotiate a humiliating treaty, sending gold, silk, and even imperial princesses as tribute to the barbarian chiefs. It is a bitter pill, but it buys time. What Liu Bang does understand, however, is the power of forgiveness and flexibility. He does not try to rebuild the Qin system of total control. Instead, he creates a hybrid government, allowing regional kings to rule semi-autonomously while maintaining central authority over taxation and the military. He reduces harsh laws and lowers taxes, giving the people room to breathe and recover. He restores Confucian scholars to positions of honor, signaling that learning and virtue, not just force, will guide his government. He is not a cultured man himself, but he is wise enough to surround himself with cultured advisors. And when he dies in 195 BCE, after only 7 years on the throne, he leaves behind not a perfect empire, but a stable one. he leaves behind the possibility of greatness. His widow, Empress Liu, seizes power as regent for their young son. She is ruthless, eliminating rivals and consolidating authority, but she also maintains the stability her husband built. When she dies, there is a brief power struggle, but by 180 BCE, a new emperor takes the throne. Emperor Wen, known as one of the most virtuous rulers in Chinese history, he continues the policies of light taxation and minimal government interference. He opens the imperial granaries during famines. He rides in an unadorned carriage and wears simple robes, setting an example of frugality. Under his rule and that of his son, Emperor Jing, the Han Dynasty enters a period known as the rule of Wen and Jing, a golden age of recovery and growing prosperity. The population begins to rise, trade flourishes, learning returns, and the stage is set for the dynasty's greatest emperor, the man who will take a recovering nation and turn it into a world power. His name is Liu Qi, and history will remember him as Emperor Wu of Han, the martial emperor. He ascends to the throne in 141 BCE at the age of 15, and he will rule for 54 years, longer than almost any emperor in Chinese history. Under his reign, the Han Dynasty will reach its greatest extent, its armies marching to the edges of the known world. Under his reign, the Silk Road will open, and China will step onto the world stage. But that story, the story of expansion and glory, begins not with conquest, but with a vision. It begins with a young emperor looking at a map and asking a question that will change everything: what lies beyond? Imagine standing at the western gate of Chang'an on a morning in the year 130 BCE, just as the sun breaks over the eastern walls. The gate towers above you, massive wooden doors reinforced with iron, standing open to receive the day's traffic. The walls themselves are rammed earth 30 feet high and thick enough that chariots can ride along their tops. They stretch away in both directions, forming a perfect square that encloses nearly 15 square miles, making Chang'an the largest city in the world at this moment in history. More than 250,000 people live within these walls, and the morning is bringing them to life. The first sounds you hear are the temple bells, ringing from the Buddhist and Taoist shrines scattered throughout the city. The sound is clear and bright in the cool air, each bell responding to the others in a cascading chorus that seems to wake the very stones. Then come the human sounds: the creak of cartwheels on cobblestone, the lowing of oxen being led to market, the calls of vendors setting up their stalls, the laughter of children being hurried along to lessons. Smoke begins to rise from 1,000 cooking fires, carrying the smell of millet porridge, steamed buns, and the sharp tang of pickled vegetables. The city is stirring, and you are part of its rhythm now. Chang'an is laid out in a perfect grid, a reflection of cosmic order imposed on the earth. The streets run north to south and east to west, dividing the city into neat rectangular wards called Liufang. Each ward is walled, with its own gates that close at night, turning the city into a labyrinth of small, secure neighborhoods. The main avenues are wide enough for several carts to pass side by side, their surfaces paved with flat stones that shine wet with morning dew. Trees line these boulevards, scholars and officials moving beneath their shade on their way to the imperial offices in the northern sector of the city. This is where power resides, in the cluster of palaces and administrative buildings that form the heart of the Han government. You begin walking north, toward the center of the city, and the character of your surroundings shifts with each ward you pass through. In the southern districts, near the gates, the buildings are modest. These are the homes of laborers, craftsmen, and small merchants. The structures are single-story, built of wood and brick with tiled roofs that curve upward at the corners, giving them an elegant profile even in their simplicity. You catch glimpses through open doorways: a potter at his wheel, spinning clay into shape with practiced hands; a woman at a loom, the rhythmic clack of the shuttle soothing and constant; a blacksmith's forge glowing orange in the shadowed interior of his shop, the ring of his hammer on iron adding its voice to the morning symphony. The smell of the city is earthy and alive. There is the sweetness of incense from household shrines, the sour tang of fermented soybeans being prepared in large ceramic jars, the clean scent of fresh wood being cut in a carpenter's yard. There is also, unavoidably, the smell of human habitation, the open sewers that run along some streets, the stables where horses and oxen are kept, the faint odor of sweat and unwashed bodies in the crowded neighborhoods. But it is not unpleasant, merely honest. This is a working city, a place where life is lived at ground level. As you move further north, the wards become more prosperous. The homes are larger, 2 or even 3 stories, their walls painted white and their gates adorned with bronze fittings. Red lanterns hang at doorways, swaying gently in the breeze. Through the windows you can see silk hangings and carved wooden furniture, the trappings of wealth. The people in these wards move with a different bearing. They wear robes of fine cloth, their hair arranged in elaborate styles, secured with jade pins and silver ornaments. Officials in black robes with square caps walk with measured steps, holding scrolls or bamboo tablets. They are the bureaucrats, the scholars, the men who keep the empire running. The markets of Chang'an are wonders unto themselves. The East Market and the West Market are the largest, each occupying an entire ward, enclosed by walls with gates at each cardinal direction. When you enter the East Market, the noise becomes overwhelming in the most wonderful way. Vendors shout their wares in a dozen dialects. Musicians play for coins, their flutes and drums adding melody to the chaos. The smell is intoxicating. Roasted meats on skewers, fresh fruit piled in pyramids of color, spices from the western regions that make your eyes water and your mouth long for their flavors. There are silks from the south, thick and lustrous, displayed on racks where they catch the light and shimmer like water. There are furs from the northern steppes, where the Iseonu roam. There are bronzes and lacquerware, pottery painted with intricate designs, bolts of hemp cloth for common wear, and jade carvings so delicate they seem impossible. You see people of every station here. A noble lady, veiled and accompanied by servants, examines a bolt of purple silk with critical eyes. A farmer from the countryside, his face weathered and his hands calloused, haggles over the price of a new plough blade. Children dart between the stalls, laughing and playing games of tag while their mothers shop. A Buddhist monk in saffron robes begs for alms, his wooden bowl held out with quiet dignity. Everyone is here, all the layers of society compressed into this vibrant, chaotic space. In one corner of the market, you find the food stalls, and the temptation is irresistible. You approach a vendor selling noodles, watching as he rolls the dough with practiced speed, cutting it into long, thin strips that he tosses into a pot of boiling broth. The steam rises, fragrant with ginger and scallions. When he serves you a bowl, the heat of it warms your hands, and the first taste is savory and comforting, the kind of food that feels like home no matter where you come from. You eat standing up, as most people do here, watching the crowd flow past like a river of humanity. When you finish, you continue north, leaving the market behind and entering the imperial district. The atmosphere changes immediately. The streets are wider, quieter, the walls are higher. Armed guards stand at intervals, watching with impassive faces. This is where the emperor lives, where the government resides, and access is restricted. Only those with official business or imperial favor can enter the inner palaces. But even from outside, you can sense the presence of power, the weight of authority that emanates from these high walls and closed gates. The Weiyang Palace, the emperor's primary residence, is the largest building complex in Chang'an. It sits on a raised platform, making it visible from almost anywhere in the city, a constant reminder of imperial authority. The palace is said to have more than 100 buildings within its walls: audience halls, living quarters, libraries, gardens, and shrines. The roofs are tiled with glazed ceramics that gleam green and gold in the sunlight. The beams are painted red and decorated with intricate patterns of dragons and phoenixes. Inside, they say, the floors are polished stone, cool to the touch, and the walls are hung with silk tapestries depicting scenes of virtue and cosmic harmony. If you are fortunate enough, if you are a scholar summoned for an audience or an official reporting on provincial matters, you might pass through those gates and walk the long path to the throne room. You would remove your shoes before entering, feeling the cold stone beneath your feet. You would prostrate yourself, forehead touching the ground, until given permission to rise, and you would see the emperor, seated on a raised dais, dressed in robes of yellow silk embroidered with dragons, the symbol of his divine mandate. His face would be composed, his eyes sharp and intelligent. This is the Son of Heaven, the man who mediates between the mortal world and the cosmic order. To be in his presence is to stand at the center of the universe. But most people in Chang'an will never enter the palace. For them, the emperor is a distant figure, more concept than man. What they know is the city itself, the rhythms of its days and seasons. They know the sound of the drum tower, marking the hours, the curfew bells that ring at sunset, signaling the closing of the ward gates. They know the festivals that punctuate the year, the New Year's celebrations with their firecrackers and dragon dances, the Qingming festival, when families sweep the tombs of their ancestors, the Mid-Autumn festival, with its mooncakes and lanterns. These are the markers of time, the shared experiences that bind a city of strangers into a community. As evening falls over Chang'an, the city transforms once more. The markets close, their gates swinging shut with a heavy finality. The wide boulevards, empty as people retreat to their homes within the wards. Lanterns are lit, warm points of light appearing in windows like stars coming out. The temperature drops, and the air grows still. You might hear music drifting from a wealthy household, the plucked strings of a zither, the clear voice of a singer. You might smell the incense offerings being made at household shrines, prayers for health and prosperity ascending with the smoke. This is Chang'an, the heart of the Han Dynasty, a city built on order and aspiration, a place where the cosmic vision of empire is made manifest in stone and wood. To live here is to live at the center of the world, in the capital of the greatest civilization under heaven. And as night settles fully, as the last curfew drum sounds and the city sinks into darkness, you can feel the weight of that significance, the responsibility and the pride of being part of something so vast and so enduring. Tomorrow the sun will rise again, the gates will open, and the life of the empire will continue its eternal cycle. But for now, there is only the quiet, the darkness, and the knowledge that you are home. Now imagine you are standing in the Hall of Great Harmony, one of the principal audience chambers within the Weiyang Palace. It is early morning, and you are one of perhaps 300 officials gathered for the daily court session. The hall is vast, its ceiling supported by massive wooden pillars painted crimson and decorated with gold leaf. The floor is polished stone, reflecting the light of hundreds of oil lamps that burn in bronze stands along the walls. At the far end of the hall, elevated on a series of platforms, sits the dragon throne, and upon it sits Emperor Wu, still young but already commanding, his gaze moving across the assembled officials with the confidence of absolute authority. You are dressed in the robes of your rank, dark silk with a square of embroidered fabric on the chest, indicating your position in the bureaucracy. The cap on your head is uncomfortable, its hard structure secured with a pin through your top knot, but you dare not adjust it. Everything here is ritual. Everything here is meaning. The way you stand, the way you bow, the words you speak, all are prescribed by centuries of tradition and the recent reforms of Confucian scholars who have made ritual the foundation of proper government. To serve in the Han government is to be part of a vast, intricate machine where every person has their place and every action has its consequence. The emperor begins the session by calling upon the Grand Counselor, the highest-ranking official in the empire, after the emperor himself. This man, elderly and dignified, approaches the throne with measured steps, performing the kowtow, the ritual prostration that signifies submission and respect. He rises only when given permission and begins his report on matters of state. His voice is clear but formal, reciting the issues of the day. A province in the south has reported flooding, the granaries in the north are low after a poor harvest. A petition from merchants requests permission to trade beyond the western frontier. Each matter is discussed, debated by the assembled ministers, and decided by the emperor with the advice of his counselors. This is how the Han Dynasty is governed, through a complex bureaucracy that extends from this hall in Chang'an to the most remote village on the frontier. The system is based on principles drawn from the teachings of Confucius, the ancient sage whose philosophy has become the foundation of Han political thought. Confucius taught that government should be moral, that rulers should lead by virtue and example rather than by force alone. He taught that society is built on relationships, ruler and subject, father and son, husband and wife, elder and younger, friend and friend. Each person has their role, their duty, and when everyone fulfills their duty with sincerity and respect, society achieves harmony. Emperor Wu has embraced this philosophy enthusiastically, but with his own interpretation, he has established an imperial university, where young men study the Confucian classics, the Analects, the Book of Songs, the Book of Rites, the Spring and Autumn Annals. The best students are recruited into government service, forming a new class of educated bureaucrats, who owe their positions not to birth or military prowess, but to their knowledge and moral cultivation. This is revolutionary. For the first time in Chinese history, a poor man with talent and education can rise to positions of real power. The examination system, which will dominate Chinese governance for the next 2,000 years, has its earliest roots here, in Emperor Wu's court. The officials who serve in this system are diverse in background but united in their training. They have spent years memorizing thousands of characters, reading and interpreting the classics, learning calligraphy, poetry, mathematics, and law. They have been tested and ranked, their abilities measured and recorded in the personnel records kept by the Ministry of Personnel. Each official wears a seal of office, a bronze or jade stamp that represents their authority to act on behalf of the emperor. To forge a seal or use one improperly is a crime punishable by death. The seal is not just a tool. It is a symbol of the emperor's trust and the official's responsibility. The structure of the government is elaborate and carefully balanced. At the top, serving directly under the emperor, are the three excellencies: the Grand Counselor, who oversees civil administration, the Imperial Chancellor, who manages the legal system, and the Grand Commandant, who controls the military. Below them are the 9 ministers, each responsible for a specific aspect of governance. The Minister of Ceremonies handles ritual and protocol. The Minister of the Guards commands the palace security forces. The Minister of Agriculture oversees taxation and the collection of grain tribute. The Minister of Justice administers the law courts. Each minister has beneath him a hierarchy of directors, supervisors, clerks, and scribes, creating a chain of command that reaches from the capital into every province and commandery of the empire. The provinces themselves are governed by administrators appointed by the central government, men who serve fixed terms and are regularly rotated to prevent them from building local power bases that could challenge the throne. These governors report regularly to the capital, sending detailed records of population, tax collection, judicial cases, and local conditions. Inspectors from the central government travel the provinces, investigating complaints, auditing accounts, and reporting on the performance of local officials. It is a system designed to maintain control, to ensure that power flows downward from the emperor and information flows upward to inform his decisions. But the government is more than just administration. It is also ritual and ceremony, the visible expression of cosmic order. The emperor's day is structured around ritual obligations. At dawn, he makes offerings at the ancestral temple, honoring the spirits of his forefathers and seeking their guidance and blessing. He performs sacrifices at the altar of heaven and earth, the great outdoor shrine where he, as the Son of Heaven, mediates between the human and divine realms. He presides over state banquets where officials are ranked by their status and seated according to elaborate protocols. Every gesture, every word is weighted with significance. The emperor is not simply a man, he is a living symbol, the axis around which the empire revolves. The palace itself is a world unto itself, a small city within the larger city of Chang'an. Thousands of people live and work here, officials and servants, eunuchs and concubines, guards and gardeners, cooks and craftsmen. The inner palace, where the emperor's wives and consorts live, is forbidden to all men except the emperor and the eunuchs who serve as intermediaries. The harem is a place of intrigue and competition, where women vie for the emperor's favor and the opportunity to bear a son who might one day inherit the throne. The power of a concubine can be immense if she is clever and fortunate. The mother of the next emperor becomes the empress dowager, wielding authority over the entire court. Many of the Han Dynasty's most dramatic moments will come from palace intrigue, from the machinations of ambitious women and scheming eunuchs. But this morning, in the Hall of Great Harmony, the business is more mundane. A provincial governor is being reprimanded for failing to maintain the roads in his jurisdiction. A scholar is being appointed to oversee the compilation of historical records. A military officer is requesting permission to lead an expedition against raiders on the northern frontier. Each matter is discussed, decided, recorded. The clerks sit to the side, their brushes moving rapidly over bamboo strips, documenting everything for the imperial archives. These records will be stored in the palace library, joining the vast collection of documents that chronicle every aspect of Han governance. Future historians will consult these records, learning about this day, this decision, this moment in time. When the court session ends, the officials file out in order of rank, the most senior leaving first, the junior officials waiting until their superiors have departed. You emerge from the hall into the palace courtyard, blinking in the bright sunlight. The contrast is startling after the dim interior of the hall. The courtyard is paved with white stone and surrounded by covered walkways with red pillars. Gardens lie beyond, carefully maintained landscapes of rocks, pools and pruned trees that create miniature vistas of natural beauty. This is the aesthetic of the Han court, a blend of grandeur and restraint, of power displayed through subtlety rather than excess. You have the afternoon free, and you walk to the Imperial Library, a building within the palace complex devoted entirely to the storage and study of books and documents. Here, hundreds of thousands of bamboo and silk scrolls are kept on wooden shelves, organized by subject and carefully preserved. Scholars work quietly at low tables, reading, copying, composing commentaries on the classics. The air smells of ink and old silk, a scent that is somehow comforting in its association with learning and wisdom. You find a scroll you have been studying, unroll it carefully on a table, and begin to read. The characters are beautifully written, the product of a master calligrapher, and the text is a passage from the Analects of Confucius on the nature of virtue. You lose yourself in the words, contemplating their meaning, feeling the connection to the long tradition of scholarship that stretches back centuries before you and will continue, you hope, for centuries after. This is the life of a Han official, a life of duty and study, ritual and service. It is not glamorous, it is not adventurous, but it is purposeful. You are part of something larger than yourself, part of a government that, for all its flaws and imperfections, strives to create order and justice across a vast empire. You are a small cog in a great machine, but the machine works, and that is a kind of miracle. As the afternoon light slants through the library windows, casting long shadows across your scroll, you feel a quiet satisfaction. This is your place. This is your purpose. And for now, in this moment, that is enough. Now let us travel from the ordered halls of the palace to the dusty frontier, to the edge of the known world. It is the year 138 BCE, and Emperor Wu has called to his throne a man named Zhang Qian. Zhang Qian is a court official of modest rank, known for his reliability and courage, but not for any particular distinction. He stands before the emperor, uncertain why he has been summoned, and listens as Emperor Wu explains a mission that will sound at first like madness. The emperor wants Zhang Qian to travel west, beyond the frontier, beyond the lands controlled by the hostile Xiangnu nomads, to find a people called the Yuezhi, and form an alliance with them against the Xiangnu. It is a diplomatic mission, but also an expedition into the unknown. No one in the Han court knows exactly where the Yuezhi are, or even if they still exist as a unified people. The journey could take years. It will certainly be dangerous. Zhang Qian accepts without hesitation. What Zhang Qian does not know, what no one in Chang'an know, is that this mission will change the world. The journey he is about to undertake will open the Silk Road, the great trade route that will connect east and west for the next 1500 years. It will bring to China knowledge of distant civilizations, new religions, exotic goods, and ideas that will enrich and complicate Chinese culture forever. But these consequences are far in the future. For now, there is only the mission, the road, and the unknown. Zhang Qian departs Chang'an with a party of about 100 men, soldiers, guides, interpreters, and servants. They travel north and west, following the edge of the desert, moving through territory that gradually becomes less and less familiar. For weeks they travel without incident, passing through the Han military garrisons that guard the frontier. But then they cross into the lands controlled by the Xiangzhen, and everything changes. The Xiangzhen are a confederation of nomadic tribes who live on horseback, herding sheep and cattle across the vast grasslands of the steppe. They are superb horsemen and archers, and they have been a constant threat to China's northern border for generations. The Han Dynasty pays them tribute to keep the peace, but the peace is fragile and often breaks. Zhang Qian's party is captured almost immediately. The Ekyun take them prisoner, not killing them but holding them as hostages. Zhang Qian is brought before the Ekyun chieftain, who questions him about his mission. Zhang Qian, with remarkable honesty or foolishness, explains that he is trying to reach the Yuezhi to form an alliance against the Ekyun chieftain. The chieftain laughs at this audacity and informs Zhang Qian that he will not be continuing his journey. Instead, he will remain with the Ekyun chieftain as a guest and a prisoner. For 10 years, Zhang Qian lives among the Xiangnu. He is given a wife from the tribe, and he has children with her. He learns their language and their ways, the rhythm of their nomadic life. He sees how they move with the seasons, driving their herds to new pastures, living in felt tents that can be packed up and transported in a single day. He learns to ride as they ride, to hunt with the bow from horseback, to survive on a diet of meat and fermented mare's milk. It is a life completely different from anything he has known, and yet he adapts, but he never forgets his mission. He never stops looking for an opportunity to escape. That opportunity comes in 129 BCE. Taking advantage of a moment of lax supervision, Zhang Qian and a few of his companions flee westward, leaving behind his new wife and children. They travel for months, crossing deserts and mountains, suffering from thirst and hunger, until finally they reach the lands of the Yuezhi. But when they arrive, they find that the Yuezhi have changed. They have moved south into Bactria, a fertile region in what is now Afghanistan, and they have settled there, building cities and living a life of prosperity. They have no interest in returning north to fight the Yuezhi Nu. They are comfortable where they are. Zhang Qian's diplomatic mission is a failure. But the journey itself is not a failure. In his travels, Zhang Qian has seen things no Han Chinese has ever seen. He has visited the great city-states of the Tarim Basin, oases surrounded by desert where merchants from many nations trade goods from across Asia. He has seen the kingdom of Fergana, famous for its heavenly horses, tall and powerful animals that make the horses of China look like ponies. He has heard of even more distant lands, Parthia, with its sophisticated culture and vast armies, the Seleucid Empire, the remnant of Alexander the Great's conquests, and far to the west, a great empire called Rome, though he knows almost nothing about it except that it exists. He has seen goods from these places, glass from Syria, woolen textiles from Parthia, spices from India, and he has realized something profound. China is not alone in the world. There are other civilizations out there, equally advanced, equally wealthy, and there is a network of trade routes connecting them all. Zhang Qian begins his return journey in 126 BCE, but the way home is as dangerous as the way out. He is captured again by the Xiongnu, held for another year, and only escapes when a succession crisis among the Xiongnu tribes creates chaos that allows him to slip away. When he finally reaches Chang'an, in 125 BCE, 13 years after he left, only he and one other member of his original party are still alive.
He is older, weathered, his hair grey, but his eyes are bright with knowledge. He goes immediately to the palace and requests an audience with Emperor Wu.
The report that Zhang Qian gives to the emperor is one of the most important documents in Chinese history, though it is recorded only in summary form in the histories. He describes the lands he has seen, the peoples he has met, the trade routes he has traveled. He tells the emperor about the heavenly horses of Fergana and suggests that acquiring such horses would greatly strengthen the Han military. He explains the complex political situation in Central Asia, the various kingdoms and tribes, and where Han influence might be extended. Most importantly, he describes the goods that are available for trade: jade, wool, spices, glassware, and above all, something that will captivate the Han court. The knowledge that in the West there is a substance called silk that is highly prized, but that China alone knows how to produce it. Emperor Wu listens with growing excitement. He has always been an expansionist, always believed that China's greatness requires a larger stage. Zhang Qian's report confirms his instincts and gives him a strategic vision. If China can control the trade routes to the West, it can not only grow wealthy but also extend its political influence. It can surround the Qiannu, attacking them from multiple directions, and it can take its place among the great powers of the world. The emperor rewards Zhang Qian richly and begins planning a series of military campaigns to secure the western regions. Over the next decades, Han armies march west. They conquer the Tarim Basin, establishing military colonies and garrisons. They defeat the kingdom of Fergana in a costly war, and bring back the prized horses. They push the Xiongnu back from the trade routes, opening the way for merchants to travel safely, and along these routes, caravans begin to move, carrying silk from China to the markets of Central Asia, Persia, and eventually Rome. The route becomes known as the Silk Road, though it is not a single road but a network of paths, and what travels along it is not just silk but ideas, religions, technologies, and cultures. Imagine standing at the edge of the Taklamakan Desert, watching a caravan prepare to depart westward. There are perhaps 200 camels, their humps swaying as they shift beneath their loads of silk bundles, lacquerware, and bronze mirrors. The merchants are a mix of Han Chinese, Sogdians, and other Central Asian peoples, men who speak multiple languages and know the desert paths. They carry swords and bows for protection against bandits. They have supplies of dried meat, grain, and water sufficient for weeks of travel. The camels are Bactrians, two-humped beasts perfectly adapted to the desert, capable of going days without water. Their bells jingle softly as they move, a sound that will become familiar across Asia, the sound of commerce, of connection. A caravan will travel along the northern or southern edge of the desert, stopping at oasis towns where they will rest, trade, and resupply. Kashgar, Khotan, Kota. These are names that will become synonymous with trade and cultural exchange. In these towns, Buddhist monks from India meet Taoist priests from China. Persian merchants trade wine and glassware for Chinese silk and ceramics. Ideas flow with the goods. Buddhism enters China along the Silk Road, carried by missionaries and travelers, and it will transform Chinese religious life. New crops arrive: grapes, alfalfa, pomegranates. New technologies: glass blowing, new weaving techniques, new musical instruments. The Silk Road is not just a trade route, it is a conduit for civilization itself, and China, once isolated at the edge of the known world, is now connected to everything. The silk that the caravans carry is produced in the mulberry groves and weaving workshops of China, a product so fine and so valuable that it becomes a form of currency. The secret of silk production, the cultivation of silkworms and the harvesting of their cocoons, is guarded jealously by the Chinese state. To reveal the secret to foreigners is punishable by death. This gives China a monopoly on one of the most desired commodities in the ancient world. In Rome, silk is literally worth its weight in gold. Roman senators complain that too much gold is flowing east to pay for silk, but their wives continue to demand the beautiful, shimmering fabric. The Silk Road makes China rich beyond measure. But the Silk Road also makes China vulnerable. The routes must be defended. Garrisons must be maintained in hostile, distant lands. The Xianyu and other nomadic groups constantly threaten the trade, raiding caravans and attacking outposts. Emperor Duyu's campaigns in the west are expensive, draining the treasury and requiring constant infusions of men and material. The expansion that Chang'an's journey made possible is glorious, but it is also exhausting. By the end of Emperor Duyu's long reign, the empire is wealthier and more powerful than ever before, but it is also strained, its resources stretched thin, its people weary of war and taxation. Yet the legacy of Zhang Qian's mission cannot be overstated. He opened the world. He connected civilizations that had existed in isolation, creating a network of exchange that would endure for centuries. The Silk Road is his monument, more enduring than any tomb or temple. And when you look at the goods in a Han market, at the glassware from Syria and the grapes from Central Asia, at the Buddhist monks walking the streets of Chang'an, you are seeing the fruits of his journey, the world that his courage and endurance brought into being. The impossible mission succeeded, not in its original goal but in something far greater. Zhang Qian did not bring back an alliance. He brought back the world. Now let us leave the glamour of the Silk Road and the power of the imperial court, and turn our attention to the vast majority of people in the Han Dynasty, the farmers who feed the empire. Imagine you are standing at the edge of a rice paddy in the Yangtze River Valley, the sun just rising over the low hills to the east. The air is warm and humid, and mist rises from the water-filled fields, creating a landscape that seems to float between earth and heaven. This is the world of the common people, and it is here, in fields like this, that the true foundation of Han prosperity is built. You are a farmer, and this is your land, or rather, you work this land. The actual ownership is complicated. The Han Dynasty theoretically operates under a system where all land belongs to the emperor, but in practice, land is bought, sold, and inherited by families. Some farmers own their plots outright, having inherited them from their ancestors. Others are tenant farmers, working land owned by wealthy landlords and paying a portion of their harvest as rent. You are fortunate. Your family owns a small plot, perhaps 20 mite, enough to support a family if the harvest is good and the taxes are not too onerous. It is not wealth, but it is security, and in a world where starvation is always a possibility, security is everything. Your day begins before dawn. You wake on a kang, a raised sleeping platform heated from below by a small fire, a luxury that makes the winter nights bearable. Your wife is already up, preparing the morning meal. The house is simple, a single-story structure of rammed earth walls and a thatched roof. There are 3 rooms, a main room where the family eats and works, a sleeping room and a small storage room for grain and tools. The floor is hard-packed earth, swept clean every day. Smoke from the cooking fire rises through a hole in the roof, and the smell of millet porridge fills the small space.
You eat quickly,
Barely tasting the food, and then you gather your tools and head to the fields. Rice cultivation is back-breaking work, a cycle of planting, weeding, and harvesting that dominates the agricultural calendar. Right now it is spring, and the fields are being prepared for planting. You wade into the water, feeling the mud squelch between your toes, and begin the work of transplanting rice seedlings. The seedlings were grown in a special nursery bed, densely packed, and now they must be moved to the main field, each one carefully placed by hand at precise intervals. You work bent over, your back aching, your hands moving with practiced efficiency. Plant, step, plant, step, plant, step. The rhythm is hypnotic, numbing the mind and body to the strain. By midday your back is screaming with pain, but you cannot stop. There is too much work and too little time. The fields must be carefully maintained. The water level has to be monitored, kept at the right depth to support the growing rice without drowning it. Weeds must be pulled constantly, as they compete with the rice for nutrients. Birds must be frightened away, lest they devour the ripening grain. Your children help with this, standing at the edges of the fields with noisemakers, shouting and clapping to scare the birds. It is tedious work, but even the youngest children can contribute, and every hand is needed. The harvest comes in late summer, and it is the most critical time of the year. The entire family works from dawn to dusk, cutting the rice stalks with sickles, bundling them, and carrying them to the threshing ground. The rice must be threshed to separate the grain from the stalk, a process that involves beating the bundles against a hard surface or using animals to trample them. Then the grain must be winnowed, tossed into the air so the wind carries away the chaff, leaving only the clean rice kernels. Every grain is precious. A single lost basket could mean the difference between having enough to eat through the winter and going hungry. But before you can store the harvest, the tax collector arrives. He is a minor official from the county seat, accompanied by soldiers to ensure compliance. The tax is calculated based on the amount of land you farm and the expected yield, and it is paid in grain. The official measures your grain with standardized containers, and a portion is loaded onto carts to be taken to the local granary. From there it will be transported to larger regional granaries and eventually to the capital, where it will feed the army, the bureaucracy, and the court. The tax is not unreasonable under good emperors, perhaps 1/10 to 1/15 of your harvest, but it is still a burden. And there are other taxes as well. Labor service, where you are required to work on government projects like road maintenance or canal digging for a certain number of days each year, and various fees and levies that seem to multiply with each passing decade. Still, you endure, because what choice do you have? This is the bargain of empire. You pay your taxes and provide your labor, and in return the government maintains order, builds infrastructure, and protects you from bandits and invaders. Most of the time, the bargain is worth it. The roads are good, allowing you to take surplus grain to market. The canals function, preventing the worst floods. The soldiers keep the northern nomads at bay. Life is hard, but it is stable, and stability is its own form of wealth. Your diet is simple. Rice or millet forms the bulk of every meal, supplemented with vegetables from your small garden, cabbage, radishes, onions. Meat is rare, usually reserved for festivals or special occasions. Chickens provide eggs, and pigs are raised and slaughtered in the winter, their meat salted or preserved in brine to last through the cold months. The food is bland by modern standards, flavored with a bit of salt or fermented soybean paste, but it is filling and sufficient. You eat to live, not for pleasure, though the memory of the New Year feast, with its dumplings and pork, lingers through the lean months. Family is the center of your existence. The Confucian philosophy that governs the state also governs the home, teaching that relationships are hierarchical and based on duty. Your father is the head of the household, and you owe him obedience and respect. When he grows old, it is your duty to care for him, just as he cared for you when you were young. This is filial piety, the most important virtue in Confucian thought. Your wife's duty is to you and to your mother, serving the family with quiet diligence. Your children's duty is to learn and to obey, preparing for the day when they will have families of their own. Every person has their place, and when everyone fulfills their role, the family prospers. Religion is woven into the fabric of daily life, a mix of Confucian ritual, Taoist philosophy, and folk beliefs that predate either. You maintain a small altar in your home where you make offerings to your ancestors, burning incense and presenting food on important dates. You believe that the spirits of your ancestors watch over you, guiding and protecting the family, and you honor them to ensure their continued favor. There are also local gods, spirits of the earth and water, who must be appeased with offerings and prayers. During planting and harvest, you make sacrifices at the small shrine at the edge of the village, asking for good weather and bountiful crops. The village itself is a tight-knit community, a collection of perhaps 50 families who have lived here for generations. Everyone knows everyone else, and life is lived in public. Privacy is a luxury that does not exist. Your neighbors know when you are struggling, and they help if they can, sharing food or labor. But they also know your failures and your weaknesses, and gossip is a constant presence. Reputation matters immensely in a society where trust and cooperation are essential for survival. To be known as lazy or dishonest is to risk social isolation, which in this world is tantamount to a death sentence. Festivals break the monotony of agricultural labor, providing moments of joy and communal celebration. The new year is the most important, a time when families gather, debts are settled, and the house is cleaned and decorated. There are special foods, new clothes if you can afford them, and firecrackers to scare away evil spirits. The Qingming festival in spring is a time to visit the graves of ancestors, cleaning the tombs and making offerings. The Mid-Autumn Festival celebrates the harvest, with mooncakes and lanterns and stories told under the full moon. These festivals are the rhythm of your year, markers of time and season, and they bind the community together in shared tradition. As night falls, you return to your small house, exhausted but satisfied. The work is hard, but it is honest, and there is a deep satisfaction in seeing the fields you have cultivated, in knowing that your labor feeds your family and supports the empire. You sit with your wife and children, eating a simple dinner of rice and vegetables, and you feel in this moment a quiet contentment. The world is large and complex, filled with emperors and wars and distant lands, but your world is here, in this village, in this field, with these people. And that is enough. Tomorrow the sun will rise, and the work will begin again, and you will be ready. This is the life of a Han farmer, and it is the life that most people live, the foundation upon which the glory of the empire rests. Now imagine you are in a workshop in Luoyang, the eastern capital of the Han Dynasty, in the year 105 CE. The room is filled with the smell of wet pulp, and the sound of water dripping into basins. You are witnessing one of the most important inventions in human history, an invention so fundamental that you are using its descendants right now. You are watching the creation of paper. The man working at the large vat before you is named Kai Lun, an official in the imperial court who has been tasked with improving the methods of record keeping. For centuries, the Han Dynasty has written its documents on bamboo strips or expensive silk, both of which have serious limitations. Bamboo is heavy and bulky, a single book can weigh dozens of pounds. Silk is light and durable, but it is far too expensive for common use. Kai Lun has developed a new solution, a method of creating a writing surface from plant fibers, and he is about to demonstrate it. The process begins with the collection of raw materials: hemp fibers, tree bark, old fishing nets, and rags. These materials are soaked in water for days until they begin to break down into a soft pulp. Then they are beaten and mashed, breaking the fibers into smaller and smaller pieces until the mixture becomes a uniform slurry. Kai Lun adds water to thin the pulp to the right consistency, stirring constantly. The next step is the crucial one. He takes a rectangular frame covered with a fine screen woven from silk threads, a mold, and he dips it into the vat of pulp. He lifts it out carefully, allowing the water to drain through the screen while the fibers settle in an even layer on the surface. The frame is left to dry in the sun, and when the moisture evaporates, what remains is a thin, flexible sheet of material. It is paper. The invention is revolutionary. Paper is lightweight, inexpensive to produce, and can be made in large quantities. It will transform administration, making record-keeping vastly more efficient. It will democratize learning, allowing books to be produced more cheaply and distributed more widely. The invention of paper will enable the spread of ideas, the preservation of knowledge, and the expansion of literacy. In time, the technology will spread westward along the Silk Road, reaching the Islamic world and eventually Europe, where it will help fuel the Renaissance. But that is centuries in the future. For now, Kai Lun presents his invention to the emperor, and the imperial court is impressed. He is rewarded with titles and wealth, and workshops are established to begin producing paper for government use. Paper is just one of many technological and scientific achievements of the Han Dynasty. This is an age of innovation and intellectual flowering, a time when Chinese civilization makes advances that will shape the future of the world. In astronomy, Han scholars create detailed star charts, mapping more than 1,000 stars and identifying the 5 visible planets. They develop theories about the movements of celestial bodies and create calendars with remarkable accuracy, allowing farmers to predict the seasons and officials to schedule rituals at the proper times. The calendar is not just a practical tool. It is a religious and political statement, a demonstration of the emperor's ability to understand and control the rhythms of the cosmos. In mathematics, Han scholars make significant advances. They develop methods for solving complex equations, understanding fractions, calculating square and cube roots, and working with negative numbers. The mathematical text 9 chapters on the mathematical art, compiled during the Han Dynasty, is a comprehensive treatise covering everything from land surveying to taxation calculations to engineering problems. It is not merely theoretical, it is practical knowledge, the mathematics needed to run an empire, to build canals and roads, to assess taxes fairly, and to distribute grain from the imperial granaries. Perhaps the most famous Han invention is the seismograph, created by the polymath Zhang Heng in 132 CE. Zhang Heng is an extraordinary figure, a man who excels in astronomy, mathematics, poetry, painting, and engineering. His seismograph is a marvel of ingenuity, a large bronze vessel shaped like a wine jar and decorated with elaborate reliefs. On the outside are 8 dragon heads, each holding a bronze ball in its mouth. Below each dragon is a bronze toad with its mouth open. Inside the vessel is a complex mechanism involving a pendulum. When an earthquake occurs, even one too distant to be felt at the location of the instrument, the pendulum swings in the direction of the seismic wave and triggers one of the dragons to release its ball, which falls into the mouth of the corresponding toad with a loud clang. The direction the dragon faces indicates the direction from which the earthquake came, allowing the government to send aid to the affected region quickly. It is the world's first seismograph, an instrument that will not be matched in the West for more than 1,000 years. In medicine, Han physicians developed theories and treatments that will form the foundation of traditional Chinese medicine for centuries. They understand the importance of diet and exercise in maintaining health. They practice acupuncture, inserting fine needles at specific points on the body to restore the balance of qi, the vital energy believed to flow through all living things. They use herbal remedies, compiling extensive pharmacopoeias that catalogue hundreds of plants and minerals and their medicinal properties. The Huangdi Nejing, or Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon, a medical text compiled during the Han Dynasty, discusses anatomy, physiology, diagnosis and treatment in sophisticated detail. It is not perfect by modern standards, but it represents a systematic attempt to understand the human body and to heal disease through rational methods. Han engineers are masters of water management, a crucial skill in a civilization dependent on irrigation agriculture. They build vast networks of canals for both transportation and irrigation, moving water from rivers to fields, preventing floods, and enabling the cultivation of previously arid land. The Zhengguo Canal, one of the great engineering projects of the Han Dynasty, irrigates more than 4 million acres of farmland in the Wei River Valley, dramatically increasing agricultural productivity. The Grand Canal, though not completed until later dynasties, has its origins in Han water projects. These are monumental undertakings, requiring the labor of tens of thousands of workers, precise surveying and innovative engineering solutions to problems of elevation, flow rate and erosion. In metallurgy, the Han Dynasty perfects techniques for producing high-quality iron and steel. Iron tools, plows and weapons become common, replacing the bronze implements of earlier eras. The Han developed blast furnaces capable of reaching the high temperatures needed to smelt iron ore, and they create steel through a process of repeated heating and hammering that aligns the metal's crystalline structure. This metallurgical knowledge gives Han farmers better tools and Han soldiers better weapons, contributing to both agricultural productivity and military success. The Han Dynasty also sees advances in textile production. In addition to silk, which remains the most prized fabric, Han weavers produce hemp and ramie cloth, using complex looms that allow for intricate patterns. The silk workshops of the empire are highly organized, employing hundreds of workers in a kind of proto-factory system. The production of a single bolt of high-quality silk requires the coordination of many specialized tasks: raising silkworms, harvesting cocoons, reeling thread, dyeing, weaving, and finishing. The result is a product so fine and beautiful that it is treasured across the ancient world. But technology is not the only area of intellectual achievement. The Han Dynasty is also a golden age of literature and scholarship. Sima Qian, the Grand Historian, compiles the records of the Grand Historian, a comprehensive history of China from its legendary origins to his own time. It is not merely a chronicle of events but a sophisticated work of historical analysis, including biographies, essays on economics and culture, and discussions of historical methodology. Sima Qian's work sets the standard for all subsequent Chinese historiography, establishing the principle that understanding the past is essential for governing the present. Poetry flourishes during the Han Dynasty, though much of it is lost to time. The Yufa, or Music Bureau, collects folk songs from across the empire, preserving them in written form. These songs, simple and direct, express the joys and sorrows of ordinary people, the longing of a soldier on the frontier for his home, the grief of a widow, the happiness of a harvest festival. They are the voices of the common people, preserved by the state and treasured by scholars. Alongside the folk songs are the more formal literary works of court poets, compositions that demonstrate virtuosity in language and adherence to strict formal rules. Philosophy during the Han Dynasty is dominated by Confucianism, but it is not the only school of thought. Taoism, the philosophy associated with the legendary Lao Tzu and the text known as the Tao Te Ching, also flourishes. Taoism emphasizes living in harmony with the Tao, the fundamental way or principle underlying the universe. It values naturalness, simplicity, and non-action, teaching that the best government is one that governs least, allowing people to live according to their own nature. Taoist texts are studied alongside Confucian classics, and many scholars see the two philosophies as complementary: Confucianism for public life and governance, Taoism for private life and spiritual cultivation. These achievements, in technology, science, literature, and philosophy, are not isolated accomplishments. They are interconnected, each building on the others, creating a culture of learning and innovation. The scholar who reads Confucius also studies astronomy. The engineer who builds canals also writes poetry. The physician who practices acupuncture also paints landscapes. This is the genius of Han civilization, the integration of knowledge across disciplines, the belief that wisdom is holistic, and that understanding the world requires both practical skill and moral cultivation. And this holistic approach to knowledge will shape Chinese culture for millennia, creating a tradition of scholarship that values both breadth and depth, both technical competence and ethical wisdom. As you leave Kai Lung's workshop, holding a sheet of freshly made paper in your hands, you can feel the potential of this simple invention. It is light, almost weightless, and yet it will carry the weight of ideas, the weight of history, the weight of human thought across centuries and continents. This is the legacy of the Han Dynasty, not just in its political power or military might, but in its gifts to human civilization, the tools and knowledge that will endure long after the empire itself has fallen. Now imagine you are standing on the northern frontier, at the edge of the Great Wall, looking out across the endless grasslands where the Eskimo ride. It is winter, and the wind cuts through your layered clothing like a knife. You are a soldier in the Han army, and this wind-swept frozen outpost is your home for the next 2 years. The Great Wall here is not the grand stone structure that tourists will visit centuries in the future. It is rammed earth, packed down layer by layer and reinforced with wooden beams. Watchtowers rise at regular intervals, simple square structures with narrow windows for observing the steppe. Inside the tower, a fire burns constantly, the smoke rising from a chimney to signal that the outpost is still manned. This is the edge of civilization, and you are one of its guardians. The Han army is one of the most formidable military forces in the ancient world, a well-organized, well-equipped machine capable of projecting power across vast distances. At its height, the army numbers more than 1 million men, though the actual fighting strength is smaller, with many soldiers serving in garrison and support roles. The core of the army is the infantry, peasant conscripts who serve mandatory terms of military service. Every able-bodied man is required to train with the local militia and serve on the frontier for a period, usually 1 or 2 years. This system ensures a steady supply of soldiers while also binding the population to the defense of the empire. You are one of these conscripts, a farmer's son from a village in Henan, and you have been sent to this remote outpost to fulfill your duty. Training began months ago in your home province, under the supervision of military officers. You learn to march in formation, to hold a spear properly, to use a crossbow, and to follow commands without hesitation. The crossbow is the signature weapon of the Han army, a powerful and relatively easy-to-use weapon that can penetrate armor at considerable range. The Han crossbow is a marvel of engineering, with a bronze trigger mechanism that allows for precise aiming and firing. You spent weeks learning to load it, cock it, aim, and fire until the motions became automatic. In battle, thousands of crossbowmen firing in volleys can devastate an enemy formation before it even closes to hand-to-hand range. But the crossbow is just one weapon in the Han arsenal. You also carry a halberd with a long wooden shaft and a bronze or iron blade. It is versatile, useful for both thrusting and hooking, and effective against cavalry. The army also employs cavalry units, though not as extensively as the nomadic Hagnu. Han cavalry are equipped with bows and swords, and trained to fight in coordinated charges, but they are never as mobile or as skilled as the steppe horsemen. To counter this disadvantage, the Han army relies on discipline, organization, and superior logistics. Your armor is made of lacquered leather scales, overlapping pieces sewn onto a fabric backing. It is lighter than metal armor and provides decent protection against slashing attacks, though it will not stop a direct thrust from a spear or an arrow at close range. On your head is a bronze helmet, simple but functional, with cheek guards that protect your face. The weight of the armor is uncomfortable at first, but you have grown used to it, and you know it might save your life. Life on the frontier is harsh and monotonous. Your days are filled with routine, standing watch on the wall, patrolling the perimeter, maintaining equipment and training. The food is simple and often inadequate, millet or rice supplemented with dried vegetables, and on lucky days, a bit of salted meat. Water is rationed, especially in the dry season, and every drop is precious. The cold in winter is brutal, and the heat in summer is equally punishing. Sandstorms sweep across the steppe with little warning, reducing visibility to nothing and covering everything in fine, gritty dust that gets into your clothes, your food, your eyes. But the worst part is the loneliness and the constant tension. You are far from home, far from family, surrounded by men you did not choose and do not particularly like. You share a small room in the barracks with a dozen other soldiers, sleeping on hard wooden bunks with thin mattresses. Privacy does not exist. The camaraderie that develops is born of necessity rather than genuine affection, a bond forged by shared suffering. And always, there is the knowledge that the Xiongnu could attack at any time. The raids are unpredictable. Sometimes months pass without incident. Sometimes they come in the night, swift and savage, and men die before they can even raise their weapons. The Xiongnu are formidable enemies, born to the saddle, capable of riding all day without tiring. They fight with composite bows, powerful weapons made of wood, horn, and sinew, capable of shooting arrows with incredible force and accuracy from horseback. Their tactics are based on mobility and deception. They attack in small groups, harassing and probing, drawing the Han soldiers out of their fortifications. If the Han give chase, the Xiongnu retreat, leading them into ambushes where larger forces wait. If the Han stay put, the Xiongnu raid the surrounding countryside, stealing livestock and supplies. It is a frustrating, draining form of warfare, and it requires constant vigilance. Your commanders are professional soldiers, career officers who have risen through the ranks based on merit and experience. They are strict disciplinarians, enforcing the harsh military code that governs the army. Punishment for infractions is swift and severe. Falling asleep on watch can result in a beating or demotion. Desertion is punishable by death, not just for the deserter but sometimes for his entire unit, a brutal policy designed to ensure that soldiers police each other. The code is cruel, but it is also effective. The Han army functions because every soldier knows that failure is not an option, that cowardice will be punished, and that their survival depends on the discipline and cohesion of the unit. There are moments of respite, times when the routine is broken by something positive. A supply caravan arrives from the south, bringing fresh grain, new equipment, and letters from home. The letters are precious, small strips of bamboo or paper covered in characters written by a village scribe, since most soldiers are illiterate. They contain news of family, of births and deaths, of harvests and festivals, and they remind you that there is a world beyond this frozen outpost, a world you are defending. Reading a letter from your mother, hearing in her simple words that she prays for your safety and hopes for your swift return, can bring tears to your eyes, and you are not ashamed of them. Occasionally, there is entertainment. Traveling performers visit the frontier posts, bringing music, acrobatics, and stories. Soldiers gamble with dice or tiles, passing the time with games of chance that are officially forbidden but universally ignored. There are brothels in the larger garrison towns, and soldiers on leave spend their meager pay on wine and women, seeking brief moments of pleasure to offset the long stretches of hardship. These are small comforts, but in this place they mean everything. When your term of service finally ends, you are given an honorable discharge and a small payment, a token of the state's gratitude for your service. You make the long journey home, traveling for weeks across mountains and rivers, and when you finally reach your village, you are greeted as a hero. You have served the empire, defended the frontier, and survived. The experience has changed you. You are harder, colder, less inclined to complain about the difficulties of farming. You have seen death, felt the weight of duty, and learned what it means to be part of something larger than yourself. And when you tell your children stories of the frontier, of the cold nights and the distant howls of wolves, of the Shengnu riders appearing like ghosts on the steppe, you will leave out the worst parts, the fear and the suffering, and instead emphasize the honor and the purpose, because that is what you need to believe, that it was worth it, that your sacrifice mattered. The Han military machine, with all its discipline and organization, is what allows the empire to survive and expand. It is the shield that protects the heartland from the barbarians, the sword that conquers new territories, the foundation upon which the Pax Sinica, the Chinese peace, is built. Without these soldiers, without their willingness to endure hardship and face death, the splendor of Chang'an, the wealth of the Silk Road, the achievements of Han civilization would not be possible. The army is the unseen pillar supporting the empire, and every soldier, from the humblest conscript to the highest general, plays a role in maintaining that support. It is not a glamorous life, but it is a necessary one, and the Han Dynasty knows this. That is why veterans are honored, why soldiers receive state burials if they die in service, why the memory of military sacrifice is preserved in the histories and celebrated in rituals. The empire remembers its defenders, and in remembering, it ensures that new generations will step forward to take their place. Now let us move forward in time, to the year 9 CE, and witness the moment when everything falls apart. The Western Han Dynasty, which has ruled China for more than 2 centuries, is about to come to an abrupt and unexpected end, not through foreign invasion or peasant rebellion, but through the ambition of a single man who believes he can create a better world. His name is Wang Mang, and he is one of history's most fascinating and controversial figures, a man who will briefly interrupt the Han Dynasty and attempt to remake Chinese society according to his own utopian vision. Wang Mang is not a peasant rebel or a military strongman. He is a member of the imperial family by marriage, a nephew of an empress, and he has spent decades climbing the ladder of power through political skill and careful cultivation of a reputation for virtue. He is known as a Confucian scholar, a man of learning and moral rectitude, someone who lives simply and donates generously to the poor. He has positioned himself as a reformer, a voice for the common people against the excesses of the wealthy aristocracy. When the young emperor dies without an heir in 6 CE, Wang Mang is appointed regent, ruling on behalf of a child emperor. But 3 years later he takes the final step. He declares that the mandate of heaven has passed from the Han Dynasty to himself, and he establishes a new dynasty, the Qin, which means new. Wang Mang's rise to power is initially popular. Many people, especially Confucian scholars, believe he is a sage king who will restore the golden age of the ancient Zhou dynasty. His rhetoric is full of promises to help the poor, to redistribute land from wealthy landlords to peasant farmers, to abolish slavery, to stabilize prices and ensure that everyone has enough to eat. These are noble goals, and they resonate with a population that has seen growing inequality and corruption under the later Western Han emperors. But the gap between Wang Mang's vision and reality will prove to be enormous. Wang Mang's reforms are radical and disruptive. He attempts to nationalize all land, declaring that it belongs to the state and will be redistributed in equal plots to peasant families. He outlaws the buying and selling of land and slaves, attempting to reverse centuries of social stratification. He tries to stabilize the economy by establishing state monopolies on salt, iron, and wine, and by regulating prices through a system of government-controlled markets. He even changes the currency multiple times, issuing new coins and declaring old ones invalid, which creates chaos in commerce. Each reform is based on classical texts, on Wang Mang's interpretation of what the ancient sages would have done, but none of them account for the complexities of actual economic and social systems. The result is disaster. The land redistribution program is impossible to implement, requiring a massive bureaucracy to survey land, assess quality, and reassign ownership. Local officials, many of whom are corrupt or simply overwhelmed, either ignore the orders or implement them in ways that benefit themselves. Wealthy landlords resist, hiding land or bribing officials. Peasants, confused by the constant changes, lose faith in the government. The currency reforms cause inflation and economic disruption, as merchants refuse to accept new coins and hoarding becomes widespread. The state monopolies are inefficient and unprofitable, draining the treasury rather than filling it. Within a few years, Wang Mang's reforms have made everything worse. Then nature itself seems to turn against the new dynasty. In the year 11 CE, the Yellow River, China's great river and the source of life for millions, changes course. The shift is catastrophic. Fields that were once fertile are now flooded or left without water. Villages are destroyed. Millions are displaced, becoming refugees in their own land. The government tries to respond, organizing relief efforts and mobilizing labor to dig new channels, but the scale of the disaster is beyond its capacity. Famine spreads. Disease follows. The people begin to murmur that heaven is displeased, that Wang Mang has lost the mandate, that the new dynasty is cursed. In this climate of desperation, rebellion erupts. In the provinces, bandit groups form, preying on travelers and raiding granaries. Some of these groups grow into full-fledged rebel armies. Two of the most important are the Red Eyebrows and the Greenwood Rebels, named for the distinguishing marks they use to identify themselves. The Red Eyebrows paint their eyebrows red, a striking and fearsome appearance that terrifies government troops. They are mostly peasants, driven by hunger and rage, with no clear political program beyond overthrowing Wang Mang and seizing food and land. The Greenwood Rebels are somewhat more organized, led by minor aristocrats and military men, and they claim to be restoring the Han Dynasty. Wang Mang responds with force, sending armies to suppress the rebellions, but his military is weakened by the same problems afflicting the rest of his government. Soldiers are unpaid or poorly supplied. Commanders are incompetent or disloyal. The armies sent to fight the rebels are often defeated, and sometimes entire units defect to the rebel side, swelling the ranks of the insurgency. The empire is unraveling, province by province, and Wang Mang, isolated in his palace in Chang'an, seems unable to grasp the reality of the situation. He continues to issue edicts based on classical precedents, to perform elaborate rituals, to insist that if only everyone would follow his reforms, everything would work out. But the people have stopped listening. The final act comes in 23 CE. A coalition of rebel armies converges on Chang'an. Wang Mang, abandoned by his generals and officials, makes a last stand in the Weiyang Palace. He retreats to the throne room, carrying the imperial regalia, the symbols of his authority. When the rebels breach the palace gates, he is sitting on the throne, clutching a jade staff and muttering passages from the classics. The rebels drag him from the throne and kill him, cutting his body into pieces. His head is displayed in the marketplace, a warning to anyone else who might claim the mandate of heaven without the strength to hold it. Wang Mang's reign lasts only 15 years, but it is 15 years of chaos that devastate China. Millions die in the famines, floods, and wars that accompany his rule. The economy collapses, infrastructure crumbles, the social order disintegrates. It is one of the darkest periods in Chinese history, a time when it seems that the empire itself might disappear, fractured into warring kingdoms as it was before the Qin unification. But the empire does not disappear. The Han Dynasty is not dead, it is only sleeping. and it is about to awaken under a new leader who will restore order and begin the dynasty's second great age. His name is Liu Xiu, a distant relative of the Western Han emperors, a man of noble blood but modest means. During the chaos of Wang Mang's collapse, Liu Xiu emerges as a military leader, rallying troops and defeating rival warlords. He is not the only one claiming the Han legacy, but he proves to be the most capable. One by one, he defeats his rivals, reuniting the empire under his rule. In 25 CE he declares himself Emperor Guangwu, the restorer of the Han. He moves the capital from Chang'an, which is in ruins, to Lushanga city further east. This marks the beginning of the Eastern Han Dynasty, the second phase of Han rule. The restoration is not easy. The empire Liu Xiu inherits is broken. The population has declined by millions. Fields lie fallow, roads and canals are in disrepair. The treasury is empty. Bandits and warlords still control large swaths of territory. But Liu Xiu is a skilled and patient ruler. He does not try to impose radical reforms like Wang Mang. Instead, he focuses on practical governance, repairing infrastructure, resettling refugees, restoring agricultural production, and re-establishing the bureaucracy. He is also remarkably magnanimous to his defeated enemies, offering pardons and positions to former rivals who submit to his authority. This pragmatic approach wins him widespread support and accelerates the process of reunification. By 36 CE, after more than a decade of campaigning, Liu Xiu has reunified the entire empire. The Han Dynasty is restored, and the Eastern Han begins a new era of stability and prosperity. It will last for nearly 200 years, continuing the golden age that Wang Mang's ambitions temporarily interrupted. The story of Wang Mang is a cautionary tale, a reminder that good intentions are not enough, that idealism without pragmatism can lead to disaster. But it is also a testament to the resilience of Chinese civilization, to the idea that the empire can survive even the worst crises, that order can be restored from chaos, and that the Han Dynasty, like the phoenix, can rise from its own ashes. Imagine standing in Luoyang in the year 80 CE, more than 50 years after Luoyang restored the Han Dynasty. The city has been rebuilt and expanded, and it is now a capital worthy of the empire's renewed glory. The streets are busy, the markets full, and there is a sense of optimism and prosperity that was absent during the dark years of Wang Mang's reign. The Eastern Han has not merely survived, it has thrived. The population has recovered. Agriculture has expanded. Trade along the Silk Road is booming, and the cultural achievements of this second Han period will equal or exceed those of the first. This is the restoration, and it marks the true zenith of Han civilization. Emperor Guangwu and his successors learn from the mistakes of the past. They govern with moderation, avoiding the extremes that led to Wang Mang's downfall. Taxes are kept relatively low, allowing the peasantry to recover. Land distribution is left largely to market forces, with the government intervening only to prevent the worst abuses. The bureaucracy is rebuilt on meritocratic principles, with officials selected through recommendations and examinations based on Confucian knowledge. The military is professionalized, with career officers leading well-trained troops. Infrastructure projects resume, roads are repaired, canals dredged, granaries restocked. The empire functions smoothly, a well-oiled machine once more. One of the most significant developments of the Eastern Han is the arrival of Buddhism. This new religion, born in India centuries earlier, travels along the Silk Road, carried by merchants and missionaries. The first recorded instance of Buddhism in China occurs during the reign of Emperor Ming in the mid-1st century CE. According to legend, the emperor has a dream in which he sees a golden figure flying through his palace. His advisors interpret this as a vision of the Buddha, and the emperor sends a delegation westward to learn more about this foreign faith. The delegation returns with Buddhist texts and monks, and the first Buddhist temple in China is established in Luoyang. Buddhism's arrival marks a profound moment in Chinese cultural history. It is the first major foreign religion to take root in China, and it will eventually transform Chinese thought, art, and society. Initially, Buddhism appeals to a relatively small audience. The religion's emphasis on individual salvation, on escaping the cycle of rebirth through meditation and moral living, seems strange to a culture that values family, social harmony, and worldly success. The Buddhist monastic system, which requires monks to renounce family ties and live apart from society, conflicts with Confucian values of filial piety. Early Chinese Buddhists have to adapt their message, emphasizing aspects of the religion that resonate with Chinese culture while downplaying those that conflict. But Buddhism also offers something that Confucianism does not: a detailed cosmology, a vision of the afterlife, and practices for achieving spiritual transformation. It provides comfort to those suffering loss, hope to those facing death, and a moral framework that complements rather than contradicts Confucian ethics. Over the following centuries, Buddhism will become deeply integrated into Chinese life, coexisting with Confucianism and Taoism in a religious landscape that is remarkably pluralistic and tolerant. Temples will be built across the empire, monasteries will become centers of learning and art, Buddhist concepts will enrich Chinese philosophy, and Buddhist art will inspire new forms of painting, sculpture, and architecture. The Eastern Han is also a period of continued technological and scientific achievement. Building on the foundations laid in the Western Han, scholars and engineers make further advances. In medicine, the physician Hua Tuo becomes famous for his surgical skills, including reportedly performing operations under anesthesia using a preparation of wine and herbal compounds. He develops exercises based on the movements of animals, an early form of physical therapy designed to promote health and longevity. In literature, the art of poetry reaches new heights, with poets composing works of exquisite beauty and emotional depth. The Four, a form of rhymed prose, becomes particularly popular, allowing poets to describe landscapes, cities, and emotions with elaborate language and rich imagery. Historiography continues to develop, with the Eastern Han producing several important historical works. Ban Gel completes the Book of Han, a comprehensive history of the Western Han Dynasty that follows the model established by Sima Qiao. His sister, Ban Zhao, a remarkable woman scholar, completes the work after her brother's death, and also writes the Lessons for Women, a Confucian text on the proper conduct of women that will influence Chinese gender norms for centuries. The Eastern Han court values learning and scholarship, and the imperial library in Luoyang grows to hold hundreds of thousands of texts, making it one of the greatest repositories of knowledge in the ancient world. Trade continues to flourish, with Luoyang becoming a cosmopolitan city where merchants from across Asia gather. The markets of Luoyang sell goods from as far west as Rome, as far south as India, and as far east as Korea and Japan. Glassware, precious stones, exotic animals, rare spices, and foreign textiles all find their way to the capital. In return, Chinese silk, porcelain, lacquerware, and metalwork flow westward, enriching the cultures of Central Asia, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. The Silk Road is at its peak during the Eastern Han, and the wealth it generates helps fund the empire's prosperity. But beneath the surface of this prosperity, problems are emerging. The Eastern Han government faces challenges that will eventually undermine its stability. One of the most serious is the growing power of eunuchs within the imperial court. Eunuchs are castrated men who serve in the inner palace, acting as intermediaries between the emperor and the outside world. Because they cannot have children, they are theoretically immune to the temptation to establish their own dynasties, making them trusted servants of the throne. But in practice, eunuchs accumulate immense power, controlling access to the emperor and using their positions to enrich themselves and their allies. By the late Eastern Han, eunuch factions are deeply involved in court politics, placing their own candidates on the throne and eliminating rivals through intrigue and violence. Another growing problem is the concentration of land in the hands of wealthy aristocratic families. Despite efforts to maintain a class of independent peasant farmers, economic pressures gradually push more and more land into the hands of the rich. Small farmers, burdened by debt, sell their land and become tenant farmers, or even slaves. The great families, with their vast estates and private armies, begin to resemble feudal lords, their loyalty to the central government increasingly tenuous. The imperial bureaucracy tries to address these issues through land reforms and anti-corruption campaigns, but the power of the aristocracy is too entrenched, and many officials are themselves members of these wealthy families. Natural disasters compound the social tensions. Floods, droughts, and locust plagues strike with depressing regularity, causing famines that kill thousands. The government's relief efforts are often inadequate, hampered by corruption and inefficiency. When the Yellow River floods in the late 2nd century, displacing millions, the human suffering is immense, and the government's response is seen as too little, too late. The people begin to lose faith in the dynasty's ability to maintain the mandate of heaven. Yet despite these problems, the Eastern Han endures for nearly 2 centuries. Emperors come and go, some competent, some weak, but the bureaucracy continues to function, the economy continues to produce wealth, and the empire continues to hold together. It is a testament to the strength of the institutions created during the Han Dynasty, to the resilience of Chinese civilization, and to the idea that order, once established, has its own momentum. But momentum can only carry you so far. Eventually, the accumulated weight of corruption, inequality, natural disasters, and political dysfunction will become too much to bear. The Eastern Han will fall, and when it does, the empire will fracture into chaos once more. But that final collapse is still decades away. For now, in the bustling streets of Luoyang, life continues, and the Eastern Han remains the greatest power in the known world. Now let us move forward once more, to the year 184 CE. And witness the beginning of the end. The Eastern Han Dynasty, which has ruled China for more than a century and a half, is about to face a crisis from which it will never fully recover. The crisis begins not with a foreign invasion or a palace coup, but with a religious movement that spreads among the common people, especially in the impoverished provinces of the north. It is called the Way of Great Peace, and its leader is a man named Zhang Ju, a charismatic healer and teacher who claims to have received divine revelations. Zhang Ju preaches that the current dynasty is corrupt and that heaven has decreed its replacement. He promises his followers that if they join his movement, they will be protected from disaster and granted long life. His symbol is a yellow turban, worn as a headband, and his followers become known as the Yellow Turbans. The Yellow Turban Rebellion erupts simultaneously across multiple provinces, a coordinated uprising that catches the government completely off guard. Hundreds of thousands of peasants, driven by desperation and inspired by Zhang Ju's apocalyptic message, rise up against local authorities. They attack government offices, burn tax records, seize granaries, and kill officials. The rebellion is not a disciplined military campaign, but a vast popular uprising, chaotic and violent, fueled by decades of accumulated grievances. The people are tired of high taxes, corrupt officials, and natural disasters that the government seems unable to prevent. They are tired of working land they do not own for landlords who show them no mercy. Zhang Ju's promise of a new world, a world of equality and peace, resonates with millions. The Han government responds with force, mobilizing armies to suppress the rebellion. But the military is no longer the efficient machine it once was. Many units are poorly trained and equipped. Corruption has weakened the officer corps, and the sheer scale of the rebellion, spread across so many provinces, strains the government's capacity to respond. The initial campaigns are inconclusive, with government forces winning some battles and losing others. Zhang Ju and his brothers, who lead different sections of the rebel army, prove to be surprisingly capable commanders, and the Yellow Turbans fight with the desperation of people who have nothing left to lose. The turning point comes when the government begins recruiting local strongmen and regional warlords to fight the rebellion. These are men who control private armies, often based on their own estates or family networks, and the government offers them ranks, titles, and autonomy in exchange for their assistance. It is a dangerous strategy, essentially admitting that the central government no longer has the power to maintain order on its own, but it is effective in the short term. The warlords, motivated by the promise of power and legitimacy, throw themselves into the fight against the Yellow Turbans. Over the next several years, the rebellion is gradually suppressed. Zhang Ju dies of illness in 184 CE, and his brothers are killed in battle. The Yellow Turban armies are defeated, their members killed or dispersed. By 205 CE, the last remnants of the rebellion have been crushed. But the victory is Pyrrhic. The Han government has defeated the Yellow Turbans, but in doing so, it has empowered the warlords who now control large swaths of the empire. These men, having tasted power and built up their own armies, are reluctant to return to their former subservient positions. They begin acting as independent rulers, collecting taxes, appointing officials, and ignoring or openly defying orders from the capital. The central government, weakened by the rebellion and by decades of internal dysfunction, lacks the strength to bring them to heel. The empire is fracturing, not into rebel territories, but into de facto independent kingdoms controlled by warlords. The situation at court is equally chaotic. The emperors of the late Eastern Han are weak, often children or teenagers manipulated by regents and advisors. The eunuch factions that dominated earlier reigns are now challenged by scholar officials who resent their power. In 189 CE, a particularly brutal power struggle erupts when a general named Dong Zhuo seizes control of the capital, Luoyang. Dong Zhuo is a brutal and tyrannical figure, and his actions alienate almost everyone. He deposes one emperor and installs another, a puppet. He massacres political opponents, loots the treasury, and terrorizes the population. In 190 CE, a coalition of warlords forms to oppose him, but the coalition quickly falls apart due to mutual distrust and competing ambitions. Dong Zhuo burns Luoyang to the ground and flees west with the emperor as his hostage, moving the court to Chang'an. The destruction of Luoyang is a symbolic moment. The capital of the Eastern Han reduced to ashes. It marks the effective end of centralized Han authority. The warlords, ostensibly fighting to restore the dynasty, are now fighting each other for supremacy. China enters a period known as the Three Kingdoms, though it will take several decades for the situation to fully crystallize into three competing states. For now, there is only chaos, with dozens of warlords vying for power, the emperor a helpless figurehead passed from one strongman to another. Among the most famous of these warlords is Cao Cao, a brilliant and ruthless military leader who controls much of northern China. Cao Cao is a complex figure, portrayed in later literature as both a villain and a hero, a tyrant and a visionary. He is a patron of the arts, a talented poet, and a strategic genius, but he is also capable of great cruelty, ordering massacres of entire cities when they resist him. Cao Cao keeps the Han Emperor under his control, ruling in his name but wielding all real power himself. In the south, other warlords establish their own bases of power. Sun Quan controls the Yangtze River Valley, and Liu Bang, claiming to be a distant relative of the Han Emperors, rules Sichuan. These three men, Cao Cao, Sun Quan, and Liu Bang, will become legendary figures, immortalized in the epic novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms, but their rise marks the end of the Han Dynasty. In 220 CE, Cao Cao dies, and his son Cao Pi takes the final step that the father had refrained from. He forces the last Han emperor to abdicate, formally ending the dynasty, and declares himself emperor of a new dynasty, the Wei. The Han Dynasty, which began with Liu Bang's victory over Shang more than 400 years earlier, is officially over. The empire that had unified China, built the Great Wall, opened the Silk Road, and created a golden age of culture and prosperity has fallen. The collapse is not sudden, it is the culmination of decades of decline, a slow unraveling of institutions, a gradual loss of legitimacy, and a series of crises that the government could not overcome. But the end, when it comes, is still shocking in its finality. The fall of the Han Dynasty is followed by nearly 4 centuries of division and warfare, a period known as the Six Dynasties. It will not be until the Sui and Tang dynasties, centuries later, that China is reunified and regains the stability and prosperity of the Han era. The memory of the Han, however, never fades. It becomes the standard against which all future dynasties are measured, the golden age that subsequent rulers aspire to recreate. The Han Dynasty is more than just a historical period. It is an ideal, a vision of what China can be when it is united, prosperous, and at peace. And even in its fall, there is a kind of grandeur, a tragic beauty in the story of a great empire that reached too high and could not sustain its own glory. And so we come to the end of our journey through the Han Dynasty, standing at the ruins of what was once the greatest empire in the world. But the story of the Han does not end with its political collapse in 220 CE. The legacy of this dynasty endures, woven into the fabric of Chinese civilization in ways both visible and invisible, shaping the culture, identity, and aspirations of the Chinese people for more than 2,000 years. The most immediate and lasting legacy is in language itself. To this day, the Chinese people call themselves Han Ren, the Han people, and their language is Han Yu, the Han language. The written script they use is Han Zi, Han characters. This is not merely a linguistic curiosity, it is a profound statement of identity. The Han Dynasty defined what it meant to be Chinese, creating a unified culture out of diverse regional traditions and establishing institutions that would endure for millennia. When a modern Chinese person identifies as Han, they are claiming a connection to this golden age, to the empire that set the template for Chinese civilization. The political legacy of the Han is equally profound. The bureaucratic system established during the Han, with its emphasis on merit-based selection of officials through examinations on Confucian texts, became the foundation of Chinese government for the next 2,000 years. The civil service examination system, which reached its fullest development in later dynasties, has its roots in the Han practice of recruiting scholars based on their knowledge and moral character. This system created a unique form of governance, one where educated men from relatively humble backgrounds could rise to positions of great power and influence. It was not a democracy, but it was a meritocracy, and it gave Chinese society a degree of social mobility that was rare in the ancient world. The Han Dynasty also established Confucianism as the state ideology, a position it would hold with varying degrees of dominance until the 20th century. The values of Confucianism, respect for hierarchy, emphasis on education, devotion to family, and the belief that rulers should govern through moral example rather than force alone, became deeply embedded in Chinese culture. These values shaped not only government but also social relationships, family structures, and individual behavior. The Confucian ideal of the virtuous scholar official who serves the state with wisdom and integrity remained a powerful cultural archetype for centuries. The technological and scientific achievements of the Han Dynasty also had lasting impacts. The invention of paper revolutionized communication, making written knowledge accessible to a much broader population and enabling the development of a literate culture. The spread of paper technology from China to the Islamic world and eventually to Europe had profound effects on global history, facilitating the spread of ideas and the development of learning. The seismograph, the crossbow trigger mechanism, the advances in metallurgy and agriculture, all of these innovations had practical effects that benefited subsequent generations. The opening of the Silk Road during the Han Dynasty created connections between East and West that would endure for more than a millennium. Even after the fall of the Han, the trade routes continued to function, bringing goods, ideas, and religions across vast distances. Buddhism, which entered China during the Han period, would become one of the major religions of East Asia, profoundly influencing Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and Vietnamese culture. The cultural exchange facilitated by the Silk Road enriched all the civilizations it touched, creating a level of interconnection that would not be seen again until the age of European exploration. The historical records compiled during the Han Dynasty, particularly Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian and Ban Ge's Book of Han, set the standard for Chinese historiography and preserved knowledge about China's past that might otherwise have been lost. These works were not merely chronicles, they were sophisticated historical analyses that sought to understand causation, to extract moral lessons from the past, and to provide guidance for the future. The tradition of official history writing that they established continued throughout Chinese history, producing an unbroken record of events that is one of the most remarkable achievements of any civilization. In art and literature, the Han Dynasty's influence is equally enduring. The aesthetic principles developed during this period, the emphasis on balance, harmony, and the integration of text and image, continued to shape Chinese art for centuries. The poetry of the Han, though much of it is lost, influenced later generations of poets. The philosophy and ethical teachings of Han thinkers continued to be studied and debated. The Han Dynasty was not just a political entity, it was a cultural flowering, a moment when Chinese civilization reached a level of sophistication and self-awareness that it would build upon for the rest of its history. But perhaps the most important legacy of the Han Dynasty is the idea itself, the concept of a unified Chinese empire governed by principles of virtue and order. The Han demonstrated that it was possible to create a large, diverse empire that was held together not just by force but by shared values, common institutions, and a sense of collective identity. This idea survived the dynasty's fall and became a guiding vision for all subsequent Chinese rulers. Whenever China fell into disunity, as it did many times over the centuries, the memory of the Han served as a reminder of what unity could achieve and as an inspiration for those who sought to restore it. Today, if you visit China, you can still see the traces of the Han Dynasty. In the museums of Beijing and Xi'an, you can view Han artifacts, jade burial suits, bronze vessels, ceramic figurines of dancers and musicians, silk paintings that have survived 2,000 years. You can visit the tomb of Emperor Jingdi and walk through the underground museum that houses thousands of miniature terracotta warriors and horses, created to serve the emperor in the afterlife. You can see sections of the Great Wall that were built or extended during the Han period. you can visit the site of ancient Chang'an, now beneath the modern city of Xi'an, and imagine the bustling capital that once stood there. But the real legacy of the Han is not in artifacts or ruins. It is in the living culture of the Chinese people, in the values they hold, the language they speak, and the way they understand their own history. The Han Dynasty is not a distant, irrelevant past. It is a living presence, a golden age that continues to inspire and to set a standard for what Chinese civilization can achieve. When modern China speaks of rejuvenation, of returning to greatness after centuries of humiliation, it is the Han Dynasty that they are thinking of, consciously or unconsciously. The Han represents a time when China was the center of the world, when its culture was admired and its power unmatched, and that memory continues to shape Chinese aspirations today. And so, our journey through the Han Dynasty comes to an end. We have walked the streets of Chang'an and stood on the frontier wall. We have witnessed the opening of the Silk Road and the invention of paper. We have seen the rise and fall of emperors, the loyalty of farmers, and the ambitions of warlords. We have experienced a golden age, a time of unprecedented prosperity and cultural achievement, and we have watched as that golden age faded into chaos and division. But the story does not end in despair. The Han Dynasty fell, but the civilization it created endured. The empire fragmented, but the idea of unity remained. And in that endurance, in that refusal to accept defeat as final, we see the true strength of Chinese civilization. The Han Dynasty is more than history. It is a testament to what humanity can achieve when it combines vision with pragmatism, when it balances power with virtue, when it values learning and seeks to create order out of chaos. It is a reminder that civilizations are fragile, that they require constant effort to maintain, and that even the greatest empires can fall if they lose sight of the principles that made them great. But it is also a reminder that the human spirit is resilient, that cultures can survive even the worst disasters, and that the achievements of one era can inspire and guide countless generations to come. Thank you for joining me tonight on this journey through the golden age of China. Our story fades now, like the last light of sunset over the ancient walls of Chang'an, but the echoes of the Han Dynasty remain, whispered in the wind that blows across the steppes, preserved in the silk that still bears the name of the road it traveled, and alive in the hearts of the people who still call themselves the children of Han. Until next time, rest well, and dream of distant ages and the empires that once shone like stars in the long night of history.